thank you very much, Alice, for this introduction. I'm very, very happy to be here. Thanks for the Architecture Foundation for the warm welcome. I want to thank also Manon Mollard. She put us in contact. I did not see you yet, but thank you very much, because I guess I'm here tonight because of your help. This is the title of the lecture we'll be giving tonight, Languages of Economy. I have to say that I really agree with the introduction of the short movie we just saw, when it says that the buildings that Rick Mather was doing they did not really look like sustainable architecture. And I think it's very important to face and to address this topic of sustainability without talking about sustainability. I think sustainability and sustainable architecture is simply architecture at some point when you start looking at it beside the 20th century. And I think there are many lessons of architects and vernacular architecture that were not claiming being sustainable and that are still very sustainable nowadays. The languages of economy. Economy is maybe the favorite word at the office, because it can embrace many levels, many scales of the project, many topics. And the notion of language also is something that kind of disappeared recently. And I like it because it puts things in common. And that's what I like, to put things in common. And I think architecture is being something when it starts being shared by several people. So beside that word, there is the notion of culture, common language, language, of course. And well, this is why I wanted to. The first image is as also an introduction, and it kind of illustrates this idea of the language and the languages of economy. It's a very, very beautiful poem written by Guillaume Apollinaire in 1918. It was a response to the Germans saying that Paris would always be Paris somehow. So beside the representation, the symbolic of the Eiffel Tower, there is beside that a very soft, very economical drawing that is a balance between the symbolic, the form of the Eiffel Tower, but also a poem that disappears into one shape. So you have here like several layers of informations that address on both, levels of means. I will have like 3 stories tonight. Maybe one very small introduction and then 3 stories. First one will be about the stone, one material that we are keen in using at the office. Second one will be about objet trouvé, trying to embrace the topic of repurposing and as-found objects when you start dealing with existing buildings. And the last one will be the hemp behind this research that we recently published, Wallness. So this is the first building that we did with the office. It's a competition. I mean, it was a commission we got in 2009. At a moment where sustainable architecture was kind of, painting everything green. And we did not feel very comfortable with this, and we wanted to provoke maybe the word, the context, the politics that were claiming being sustainable while mainly doing buildings such as this one, all concrete. So it was just for us a way to try maybe to explain a little more what we did here. I mean, think about when we start talking about sustainable architecture. It was definitely not painting a building green, and we had to go deeper maybe in architectural culture and history of construction to really understand what those sustainable architecture means. This is a research. So I'll start with the research, even if the building we built was previous and did before this exhibition. It was an exhibition that were hosted in Pavillon d'Arsenal in 2018. And this exhibition was about, here it is, addressing 3 major relations, with construction. First one was the territory, the resource itself, so limestone, I will talk about this. Second one was the ground, so relation with the ground. Building is extraction, whatever you do. It's transforming the crust, the earthen, the crust of earth into element of architecture. And third one was this idea of when you start finding a natural object, then architecture starts when the hand of men and women starts being starts to appear, let's say, on the natural fragment. That was more or less, you know, the way we wanted to start to deal with sustainable architecture through construction, through the ground, and with the notion of territory. So we kind of sum up some very, very basic, stone and rock knowledge. So we understood. I will go very quick on that. There are three major types. It's in French, but you can recognize the word. Three major types of rock. First is magmatic, sedimentary, and then metamorphic. And then our stone, the pierre calcaire limestone, is part of sedimentary stones. What's interesting is the cycle, you know, of the process. The sediments becomes sedimentary rocks, and then high levels of temperature and pressures, they become metamorphic stones, and then they got heated, and then they become magmatic, and then erosion, and then sediments again, and then sedimentary. And it's very interesting to understand that this is a very, very, very long cycle to get the sedimentary stone, which is ages between like 25 to more than 100 million years. So this is the map of France. We should at some point extend, of course, the different hatch beside and abroad, of course, because the crust doesn't stop here in France. It goes to Italy, Belgium, of course, Spain, and under the different seas. And this is the map of the three different types of stones. So as we can see, which is basically the case in 99% of the crust of Earth, it's sedimentary stone. So this is a huge amount of resource that we should all use to build our buildings. If we zoom in, then you can realize that we have like different colors here in the Bassin de Paris, Parisian Basin, which is where most of the stones of Paris have been extracted during the construction of the city since like 1,000 years. Then we can zoom in and we can understand the section across Île-de-France. So here you have Normandy, Île-de-France, Champagne, Lorraine, and then les Vosges. And this is the Parisian Basin, where you have all the sedimentation layers that have been layering on top of each other until creating this map of what you see here in the lighter color is the Eocene era, and then you have the Lithuanian, which is the most accessible layer of stone that you can get to build and to extract construction stone from construction. And then we selected 9 quarries that you can see here, 9 operational quarries. So that was part of the exhibition to demonstrate the availability of the Parisian Basin to deliver, you know, a certain amount of stones to build and to be part of the actual construction. So we were very interested in a scientific, in a very rational. We used old drawings for geologists, such as Brongniart, very famous one. And then we started to describe each, you know, ground of each quarry and to be very precise about the types of stones that were included in each ground of each of these 9 quarries. So I won't go to all the quarries, but I will just show one. This is one quarry, for instance. Carrière de Saint-Maximin, which is a very, very famous quarry, which is one that has, the Pierre de Saint-Maximin, Saint-Maximin stone is one of the most important stones during the Haussmann period in the 19th century. Here in gray, you can see what has been extracted, and then in brown, what could be extracted yet. So we, for each quarry, described the very precise amount of potential, you know, a resource to continue building Paris and the rest of the territory with these natural stones, with natural material. For each case, we described different layers. So first layer is what we call the découvert. So it's the earth that you have on top of the first layers of stone, and then you have different kind of stone. You have roche franche, roche ferme fine, roche demi fine, etc., which is the different types of sedimentations layers. And then in each of these beds, you have like different types of stones resistant to compression. You have like a whole, let's say, panoply of qualities of resistance to compression, of types of stone in each quarry. Another one, which is the biggest one around Paris, which is Carrière de Noyon. This quarry is very big, so you can see again in gray. But this one is, if the first one was uncovered, quarry, this one is an underground quarry. So here you can see the earth, and then you can see the way it is extracted. It is the stone is evacuated from this kind of tunnels that you can see. Here, a little less types of stone, but very, very, very big quarry in front. So we displayed all the types of stone. So each were like small blocks. They were all very specific, classified from here, the hardest one, to the softest one. So, we have like different types of resistance. So first one can handle like maybe a type of resistance which is more or less even better than concrete, from like 75 to 80 megapascal. And this one over here is like softer, so it's like between 6 to 7 megapascal. So different types, different color, different shapes, different aspects. But just to demonstrate the richness, the elegance, of the Parisian soil. And beyond this, we started, and this was also happening at the end of the construction of our building, right after the end of the construction of our building, Röberkampf. So the conclusions that we were trying to have here in this exhibition, the questions we were raising were totally connected to the building we were doing. First thing is this act of sowing, of cutting the ground with this only one tool that has been used since years. The energy has changed, but it's the very same principle. So it's a very big knife like this, une tronçonneuse, which we call haveuse, naveuse. And it's the very, very same principle. And when you transform, when you extract, transform, and put stone in the buildings, it's the exact same way. So we did this drawing that was very interesting to us because it was showing, the different moment of transformation. On top, you can see the concrete, and here you can see the stone. So we were happy to compare, how it works from sedimentation in both cases, here and there. But, the different things that sedimentation and that the lime needs to face before becoming a wall. Here you just have extraction, one cut, and then the layout. And we were very happy about understanding that there is this kind of immediacy, in the way you deal with this natural element that become an architectural element. Natural piece of ground becomes a very, very sophisticated and cultural element of architecture. Here you can recognize Le Corbusier looking at a ruin. And this immediacy was very appealing to us because that image followed us since then, because it's like, the stone becoming the column that could become stone again on the simple ground. Even if you look at it with eyes of an architect, then you can still recognize the print, of earth in the element you manipulate. Another one was this relation with ground. Like I said at the beginning, this relation with ground was very important to produce this kind of image with our friend photographer, Jaime Meloni. And he was facing like very, as a portrait, the scarf and the things that were happening while extracting the stone. And we kind of recall, the Caspar David Friedrich beautiful images, even if he did not go himself look at the mountain. He was very, interested in this romantic view, this sublime view on the landscapes. And we were wondering, it was more or less a few years after this marvelous exposition by Bruno Latour, who was saying, is this still possible? Is this relation with landscape as a sublime way, as something you look at with romantic eyes, is still possible when you start, manipulating nature, extracting things, when you start, having a very different relation with the earth. You cannot look at it as something that's stronger than you, but let's say that Anthropocene, this moment of civilization is kind of, overpassing the power of human beyond the one of nature. But we still looked, and we're very interested in this other figure, Eugène Viollet-le-Duc, and we had the same kind of relation with the landscape in a very rational, a very scientific way of looking at things. So, he describes the Mont Blanc, and then he starts to look at the way, the slopes and everything. But we realized that, again, like I said, this relation we had, that Caspar Friedrich had with nature, that the human being had with nature, was not possible, even if this industry is a low-carbon industry. It's still something that you do on Earth, and it's still something that what we like, but that stays, that remains, and that you can face, which is very different in the concrete industry, where you don't really know where things come from. Here, you exactly know where the natural, element is coming from. And last, maybe a conclusion of this exhibition was the interest we had with hybrid architecture. There were these debates that we had with our colleagues interested also in the stone construction, saying that, okay, when you use stone, you should not use anything else but stone. We did not feel very comfortable with this again, and we thought maybe one way to give power to the stone industry is to makes it, negotiate with the other industry rather than saying that, okay, I'm the best, I have the solution and concrete is bad. I think we should rather, find and understand maybe the role of each element in a structure such as this one from Viollet-le-Duc, and to say, okay, maybe hybrid architecture is a way to give a space to stone rather than just, reconsidering the war between the different materials. So hybrid architecture has been also a very, very beautiful language abroad, for instance, here in Japan, or here in the John Hudson House Chandlis. And we were very interested in this kind of, means towards architecture and the mix of materials. So this building was delivered like 6 months before, a year before this exhibition. It's a building which is located Rue Oberkampf. It's right here. So the photo is taken from Avenue Parmentier. So the building is trying to give a balance, one would say, between the very bourgeois, heavy Haussmannian style. This is one of the latest Haussmannian buildings, for instance, late of the 19th century, when you can see one here, which is an older one. So you can see the difference between not the stones, but the language and the thickness of the facade. And here you can guess one very, very boring and banal Faubourian building. So our strategy was maybe to find this kind of balance between the two, the sophistication of the bourgeois Haussmannian style and maybe the dryness of the building, the Faubourian buildings. So it takes place in one like this. In a plot, a line on Rue Oberkampf. Here you can see the response on the master plan. So you can see here, I never find, the courtyard, which is a response to existing courtyard on the center of the plot. You can guess the shapes of the window, and here the adjunctions of buildings, concrete elements that we can talk about after. The plan, 3 apartments per each floor plan. One is traversant, crossing apartment. And here you can see the setbacks. Each time you have one setback, you lose one room to raise the top, and then one studio here. Also, the structure, which was another way to consider this moment of the late 19th century where housing a building in an Haussmannian style, while also considering steel into construction. So you can recognize steel columns here in the middle of the plan, which are kind of organizing and structuring the layer of the plan. It kind of order, the position of the shafts and of the bathrooms and everything here and there. One view from the apartment, you can see here the steel structure and the large openings because of the position of the concrete lintel on top. That's a construction site picture. So wooden floor, load-bearing stones, and steel structure. So it was very directly connected to Osmanian architecture, trying to demonstrate here that sustainable architecture was just, simple ways to be sustainable is to be connected somehow to some parts of history, which were already dealing with the same topics without knowing it, of course. But that was the most interesting part to us. And then you can see the wooden structure used because of the wood, of course, but also because of the weight of this plinth, of these floors, which were very light. And the lightness, let's say, brings the possibility to use load-bearing stones because of the light of the. So that's one drawing, which is also totally dedicated to Auguste Choisy ways of looking at fragments like this, and also the assemblage of the different elements. So you can see the plinth, the concrete, the stone, and everything, in order to really organize the position of each components, which are becoming elements at some point, creating this kind of, let's say, sustainable, one would say, architecture without really claiming it. So here you can see the setbacks again. The window that we can talk about now. So the window is an assemblage of single stones like this, and then there is this small shape that we gave to the lintel. If I go back to the quarry, I will talk about this lintel afterwards, but so this is where the stones come from. It's a pity that they do not come from around Paris, and this is why we made the exhibition. It's because the building was built before the exhibition, so at the end of the building we realized that we should have used a Parisian stone in order to reduce, the distance between the building and the resource. But we were, it was the first building, and the next one hopefully will be aiming this ambition. So we get inside the quarry, and then it's very interesting to recognize the very, very, very specific on-earth position of the material you will use. It's very enthusiastic, And then you can see our stones being extracted here, being laid out, so you can choose the stone you want, the stones you don't want. It's like being on a market, actually, and choosing, the different vegetables you want to get. So you talk to the different people in charge, and then you say, okay, there is too much iron marks on this one, and this one is maybe too white, and et cetera, et cetera. You can kind of select, the ingredients of the building. And then there is this moment of the cut. And this is where the economy comes again in the discussion, because that's the only thing that you do, to this big fragment of soil. So when you start cutting this very, very large and big piece of ground, of lime ground, then you understand that this is the only tool you have in the economy of a social market. It's the only tool you have to give and to bring some mot de nature and some language and something, that will be relevant to the shape of the building. So this cut, the angle of this cut, is the only thing that we can at this moment afford, even if the budget was high, let's be honest. But in the industry, you cannot do much more than just giving an angle to a saw. And then in this angle, we were very happy because we were starting to being connected, to the buildings we were seeing on the left side of the image, this bourgeois building, which we're claiming bourgeoisie and richness and wealthness with mot de nature and things that were going away from the building, apart from the building. And we're interested in this extraction being inside the building, bringing light, of course. And then what you can see again inside, that's the construction. So you can see the different layers of stone. Very, very huge reference, I apologize, but it's very beautiful building that was also trying to deal with, what's load-bearing. Everything is load-bearing, more or less, in this building. And they were keen on showing, the distinction or maybe the ambiguity of the wall between the skeleton. And when you start building with stones, this is something you very, very, very easily face. Am I a skeleton? Am I a column? Am I a wall? And this is, in the Rucellai building, something that were very to us appealing. And we were following this path, trying to say, okay, maybe in this consideration, bringing this here little angle to the lintel, then we can start, showing the presence of a column, even if these stones belong either to the window and to the columns and to the wall. We were starting just with one cut, one small cut, to participate to these debates of this ambiguity between when I'm building, am I doing a stone, am I doing a column, or am I doing a wall? And then from this building, we did this other one, which is the construction will start here on November 1st. So it's another building, but this time a little bigger than the first one, but very same principle, so hybrid, load-bearing walls, and a concrete here base. It's located in Paris 13e, so southeast of Paris, nearby not far from the Seine and the Boulevard Périphérique, right below the Jean Nouvel Tower, very high. And that is the plan. So the plan is following, let's say, very strict measurements principles. So load-bearing facade, concrete here, core, and then it used to be wood, but now it becomes concrete columns here inside the plan. And the plan, even if it's changed a little bit, it is changing nowadays. I mean, it has changed a while ago, but still same principle, or the dimensions of each rooms are being accorded, to the dimension and to the measures of the structure. Hybrid, again, just like the previous building, so you can see the concrete core, which is going, the concrete is used less and less whenever you start reaching the top. Wood floors, load-bearing walls again. And this is how it works, more or less. So we have like one. This is the floor on the top. This is the register below. And we have to be very precise also in the structural drawings when you start, having the loads of the plinths getting in the very strict middle of the trumeaux, of the pieces of stones here along the building, in order to maintain a very let's say, attached relation between the plinths and the load-bearing facades. That's the construction principle. So we have one layer, let's say, strip of wood around the building, necessary because of the weight, again, of the floors. And then inside you have concrete, and you have this column supporting the end of the concrete, so that the concrete doesn't touch the facade, in order to maintain the load-bearingness, one would say, of the facade. And then you have insulation here inside the building. And more recently, we had to add these very large pieces of stones in order to resist, to the horizontal efforts. Before, we used to have like rooms at the angles, but to maintain the load-bearing facades, we had to add recently, this summer, these pieces of stone, but then it creates this kind of ambiguity also between, the dimension here of the windows and etc. I think the scale is a little reduced. Another story is the one about objet trouvé. Objet trouvé is to us another way to address this matter of sustainable architecture. And I will also borrow this word objet trouvé I will very quickly present one small exhibition that we did in Cité de l'Architecture. That was followed by, a sculpture, and then followed by an exhibition. And I will shortly talk about one class I'm giving to the students since 5 years, where I've been really interested in this matter, objet trouvé, as a new relations we can have with objects, surrounding objects, ordinary objects, topics that have been also raised by artists at the beginning of the 20th century, such as Apollinaire, for instance, which we were talking about at the beginning of the lecture. So very shortly, this is we were invited by Cité de l'Architecture to invent something with this very weird shape, which is a ramp, which is supposed to be used for skateboards, but which was the things that we had to deal with, and we found ourselves a little lost, we have to say. But we consider this as an objet trouvé, again, something we have to deal with, just like if you were, the mission was to transform an existing building. So again, very quick, we were just stepping out of the stone exhibition, and we thought, we were having in mind the action of cutting things. So we decided, with the permission of the Cité de l'Architecture, to cut in 4 parts, this weird object. And then in the manipulation, we decided, so very simple economical gesture. And then we move around the pieces in order to lose, the symbolic of the ramp, of the skateboard ramp, to create a very simple, architectural model. So with the act of cutting, so economical act, we were finding another language, again, for these pieces of wood that we found on site. So at the end, it was just a model of a building in which you can still recognize, I'm very interested in that, the previous shape as if it was a new destiny for the same object, as if, the things were having like different lives, and the object had a life, and he has another one, it has another one, and so on. And then it was very interesting. It was the first relation, with the purpose of reuse, of recycling, of, what it is, what does it mean to use something and to recognize the thing that you manipulate in, the next process. So here you can see the circular shape and recognize, the existing, and people that know this weird shape are recognizing and say, oh, okay, like a déjà vu, moment of situation. Even if life goes on, it's always interesting to maintain, the autonomy and the identity of the object, of the ordinary object you manipulate in construction. And then we invited several young offices interested in the same purpose, and we asked them to kind of do the same thing with one object that they should select in their ordinary life, and to transform it and to give like another scale, another purpose, just to try to express again the powerness, the strength of the idea of the objet trouvé. Like if something, the most boring object could become the most interesting architectural element. For instance, Piove de Fabi in Brussels, they use this, they're Italian of course, and they use this Parmigiano rape, and then they put it and turned it over in a very simple gesture again. So again, this economy, language raising from the economy of the gesture, and it becomes an architectural element. It's fun, but it's very, very, very serious. Koffingschulz from Munich, heating system becomes a column. A tower, so it's just a matter of scale, but it's just the persistence of the components of the existing object, the found object that become something totally different, but still the same, still the same. Sanchez Benton, our friends from London, also, they use this element, this échelle, I don't know how you say échelle. Yeah, thanks. And it became kind of totem, explaining. And while this were happening, it's also a way to be very observative and to look at the things. The moment you want to transform something and you want to keep in an economical way, the qualities of the manipulated object, then you start to look at it very closely, very precisely. Again, just like a scientist, an observator that is very interested in things that we do not usually look at. So this is the few slides I will talk about coming from the class I'm giving to the students, which is also a start of a thesis I will probably try to finalize within the next 2 years. So this title is The Liberation of the Object, is something that I borrowed to a very beautiful book, maybe from William Seitz. It was the first retrospective of this notion of assemblage that I've maybe given birth to the nicest artifact of the 20th century. And in this very specific book, he treats about many artists. There is this, I translated myself, so it's, but this very quote from Guillaume Apollinaire again, which says, the real object, or its trompe-l'œil representation, is undoubtedly destined to play an increasingly important role. It forms the inner frame of the painting and defines in internal boundaries, just as the frame marks its outer limits. And what I like here in this sentence, it's a 1913 sentence, and he was looking at Picasso, Braque work from like 19 1906 to 1912 to the beautiful collages and papier collé. And I was just realizing how important in the 20th century the object, the simple objects, the as-found object. Before Duchamp, he was really describing the power and the strength of the observation and also of the way you look at the things and the way you look at the things that have never been looked at before in order, really in an economical order, to transform it. So he was totally dedicated to this kind of beautiful collage. Here it's a simple object, it's an alcohol bottle, a bottle of Suze, which is looked at by Picasso. I won't go into the details of Cubism, but what I'm interested in here is the fact that he's looking at a very, very, very simple object, as it was the very first beginning of a revolution. Here you can recognize the Nature morte à la chaise cannée, which is considered by William Seitz as the first assemblage painting. And here Picasso is bringing this rope, around this oval painting, also to give another destiny to this beautiful rope. Picasso again with this spoon on top of a glass structure, le verre d'absinthe. Here you have the representation of the glass. Sorry. On top of it, he puts a real spoon. It's the first time someone puts a real object on a kind of, it was not abstract but weird figurative, sculpture. And here they were kind of giving birth again to new relations with very simple things. Marcel Duchamp, of course, here he just like turns down and writes something, but it's just a way to, okay, what if everything was art? I mean, I won't go into the details. And beside this class, I'm also, it's to me a method to look, at different architectural production of nowadays, such as this very, very beautiful shop that has been done by Ingevink and his colleague and her colleague, in Ghent, in Antwerpen, Here's the beauty of the project is just the use of the things, that has been used to build very simple walls and separative walls in the project. So this is an object that we all see everywhere. And the language here, it raises from, the manipulation of something that has just been put very simply in a contrast with a very bourgeois, again, existing shop. Anne Lacaton and Jean-Philippe Vassal also giving, new relations with very simple objects. And I'm trying to express that this relation we have with this kind of poverty, I mean, beautiful poverty, is totally related with this, work done by this great artist at the beginning of the century. Éric Lapierre also, when he uses this kind of weird étanchéité, layer on top of the building, rather than saying that this is something that should be hidden, he claims that this very poor, very banal, material should be also raised to, sophistications in order to connect his building to, Samper discussions about the texture, about the textile, about the skin of the building, while using a very, very simple, very, very simple and cheap material. So this was, it's on process, of course, but we're very keen on trying, hypotheses such as this one. And in this project, we're trying to follow up on the same principle, existing objects, relation with object. This is an existing building. It's a very recent competition we won in Brussels with two other practices, A Practice and A2RC. We've been doing several projects with them and very keen on working in Brussels. It's the third competitions we won in Brussels. And the purpose is to transform these four like big dinosaurs, in the southeast of Brussels. So of course, developers, it took like ages to organize the competition because the developers wanted to destroy the buildings. And then the Brussels, city of Brussels claimed that they should not be demolished and they should be kept. And then the developers is now understanding the value of these buildings, not because they're nice, because they're not, But it's not the question anymore. Is that nice? Should I be demolished? What can I do with it? It's just because it's here. And the way it is, I mean, and the fact that it is here is more, powerful that, the relation you can start to have with this kind of building. So that's the existing. So I will very quickly describe one of the existing building and try to follow up on this, idea of looking at things. The way you look at the structure. I was talking about the way you look at very small objects, but I think it's the same principle, whether the scale is bigger or even smaller. So you can here see the shape of the building, which is a very, very weird. Three triangle, but how we call them, triangle buildings are kind of, they have the same structural principle. So you have this concrete planes, floors. Then you have this cores, which is very weird, very, very sophisticated. And many of these concrete elements are necessary, to the horizontal in order to resist to the horizontal efforts of the wind and everything. So we cannot get rid of everything inside. And we cannot get rid of the facade because it's the purpose of it. And even if the developer would wish really to get rid of this, the city of Brussels is claiming that we should keep it, and we of course agree with it. Next, please. Zoom into the core so you can see the different elements I was describing. So these plans are things that you get at the very beginning of the competition. So you describe it and you talk with engineers and you try to find a way out, to make housing work into these four buildings, even if I will be talking about three triangles only. Next. And what's great when you start to use existing shapes and existing objects is the shapes and the forms you can provide, which is something you would never achieve without an existing structure. So we're very interested in, this common weird shape spaces that are, going inside the building. I won't talk about the plan because they're not done yet, and it's not the purpose. But what we like is, the things that you get and the thing you have to deal with, and the shapes it leads without, one would say, your will. And that's very interesting, just as, the Marcel Duchamp, object. You get it, and you just look at it, and it's just the way it goes. So you kind of follow, the objects in its new life. Next, sorry. That's the facade. Self-load-bearing facade, even if it gets just a little bit of the loads of the floors. And the whole here debates it about the keeping. I mean, do we keep the existing windows or not? We have next, 1,887 windows. Okay, they were built in 1999. They were changed according to the previous building. It was built in between 1982 and 1984 for the buildings you had on the right side of the image, if you remember, and the triangles they were before. And so here, that's the existing windows. They're a lot, very, very good shape. But the problem is they do not offer technical, acoustic, and thermal conditions that the developer wants to offer comfort in the buildings. So this topic is totally kind of let's say incoherent with the rays of different regulations. The windows, let's consider the new, more or less. They're nice, but the regulation forces us to get to trash, let's say, them. Next. So that's the description of the window. It's very well done, honestly. You have a binder outside here. It's aluminum windows, double glazed windows. So everything is totally dedicated to be kept, actually, totally okay and aware of being kept. Next. And if we talk about CO2, it's very interesting to understand that, okay, it's each window aluminium window is more or less 1.8 square meters per window. Each square meters have consumed, one would say, 70 kilograms of CO2. So total, CO2 consumed, emission, sorry, in the construction and the shape of the window is like 235,000 kilograms, as you can read. Next. Which is more or less like 260 times from London to New York by plane. And we're trying to express this kind of arguments, to the developer. We're trying to say, okay, we should really make any efforts that are possible, and we're trying to organize, and this is like meetings we have like tomorrow and yesterday and every day to say that, okay, we should really reconsider, this relation with this kind of existing object that should never, ever be trashed. Next. So we are kind of organizing this strategy where we say, okay, we have the existing facade, we have the existing windows, and we should really not get rid of these windows, that we should really, really keep them. And we try to argue and to express the fact that, okay, what if we add one insulation layer inside the building, and we have another layer of windows, very simple windows, and we're trying to demonstrate that the price of these windows, because of the existing ones, should be reduced first, and of course we will save the economy of the trash of the existing windows. And then we can also create this kind of new thickness, inside the building to maintain the identity of the existing envelope, the existing structure and the existing windows, and to give another domestic, scale to this thickness, to this insulated thickness, which is the section you can see here. So that's one strategy, and here I will talk about the hemp after. So that's hempcrete insulation filled in this thickness. And then you can see that there is one layer, one thickness, of insulation inhabited here with new uses and performant here in order to maintain comfort inside the building. Next. So that's the other strategy. So the first one is the relation we have with the cores, like I said. And second one is this, it works. No. Previous, sorry. And then we inhabit, this thickness. And this is kind of start being the story of the Wallness I will talk about afterwards. It's the way that with this new layer of insulation, this new inhabited layer of insulation, either it's glass or it's outdoor space, but it's the very same blue lines that goes all around the building that create, these new things that you can enter yourself or stuff or objects dedicated to the domestic scales. Next. Next. And that's the third story. The story of, I will talk about, I don't have the clock anymore, so you just tell me when I'm too long. The hemp. So this is the first house we did with my partner and the rest of the team. So it's kind of contemporary with the concrete building we were doing, I was showing at the beginning of the lecture. So it's a small house next, in a very, very beautiful landscape in Normandy. And it was a commission, so we were very lucky. A guy came and we had never done nothing before, and he said, okay, I want a house. I have this very beautiful plot in the middle of Normandy, in a previous, sorry. And the client was very good at describing the climate of his landscape. And we decided that we should team up with these engineers. So I did not mention them at the beginning of the lecture because this was the first meeting we had with them. Laurent and Grégoire Mouly, two engineers, two brothers. One is talking about structure mostly, and the other one is talking about insulation and envelope and thermal issues and topics. And we understood that the client, in the way he was describing the climate, the seasons, the relation he had with the environment, was very it was very, let's say, the two engineers were very curious about, this relation with climate, and they bring here in the topic this material we discovered at this time, which was the hemp. And this was the first moment, so we did not know much about it at this time, but we realized that the relation with the use of hempcrete insulation, so this mix of hemp and lime, was a way to create some new relations with this environment that was described by the client. Engineers were saying this, so we were listening, like a new way to recreate, let's say, new relations with engineers. Next. So that's the house. Very interested also in the tradition form. So it's a longère that we doubled, simply. Next. Doubling it, we kind of offered a new vision, a new space, new types of space for the longère, which is very often a very long house without any corridor. And here, the thickness, the doubling, was offering some new perspectives and relation between the different spaces. Here you have one interior space. Here you have one, let's say, jardin d'hiver, loggia, outdoor space. Next. The skeleton is all made out of wood. So following the same constructive principles of most of the houses built in the territory of Normandy, just building with wood, detached, of course, from the ground to maintain the humidity away, from the wood elements. Next. And the subject was just like this. How can we just fill in, the blank, and to consider this envelope as something, the insulation as a constitution, as an element, as a component, before being an element, a component of the wall itself. So it was just a torchis, this thing that you fill, that you put in Normandy and many rural territory, the things that you put inside the skeleton. It was the very same principle, but with a material that was way more dedicated and performant with the surrounding environment. Next. So that's the plan of the house. So that's the garage. The entrance is here. So you enter the house through this kind of protected outdoor space. It's a living house. It's not a secondary house. It's not a holiday house. It's a house for a family that lives in here the whole year. So it's not the very same thing when the relation with exterior, with environment. We protected all the outdoor spaces. And then we separated, this living room, secondary living room, which became at the end 2 rooms. The room for the parents, the kitchen. And the living room here was, having connection with these 3 outdoor spaces and with the environment. So we were very, in this kind of double longère, interested in the new relation spaces beside the tradition could have all the different rooms, the relations between the rooms. Sorry. Next. But more important was the way we were starting to draw, the envelope. So this is all insulation. And very recently, while we were finalizing the research Wallness, we understood that at this moment of the practice, we decided that we should not represent what's in between the different parts, different elements of the structure with, black poché, like if, the matter was not important and that we should, just represent fullness in between the windows. And we realized recently, again, that maybe the way we were starting to represent, the solidity of the building was another manner to reconsider relation through the insulation between the environment. So it was not only visual through the window, but because of the characteristic of the hemp, I will talk about that now, we could provide some new relations with the environment and the exterior. The composition of the hemp, the way the air and water goes into it, the reactions, the dynamic that are happening inside, the hemp envelope, is giving some new interaction, even somehow, one would say, new transparencies, between inside and outside. Next. So very interested, in this facade, which was like plain, blind, but still giving some interesting, very interesting relation with exterior, in which the space you can, feel the season, when it's dry, when it's wet, when it's summer, when it's winter. And the client keeps telling us, last time we saw him was 2 years ago, and he told us he was very, very interested in the interaction, through the hemp with the different seasons. Next. And then the view of the building, of the house, which has gotten black, but it's at the end of the construction 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago now. Next. And this building, almost 10 years later, gave birth to another project, small 15 apartments building, Rue Marx d'Ormois, sorry. Same principle, same use, same material, so hemp. Next. Again, it's when you build in Paris, I did not really talk about it, but you rather build streets, just like Oberkampf. It's very strict, it's a very monumental public space, and whatever you do, you have to participate to the landscape of the street. So in Oberkampf, it's a very, like I described, bourgeois, Haussmannian, and Faubourian street. Here it's only Faubourg, so everything is very eclectic, very banal buildings. And the street is way wilder than the Rue Oberkampf, which was narrower. But here we were investigating another tradition, the Sick facade. The Sick facade on 2 levels, the one that we will talk about, which is installation level. So how can a wall provide, describe, let's say, or provide new spaces, but also the Sick facade, the loggia, the bow window, thickness. Next. So that's the axonometric view. You can see it's a crossing, again, plot. So you can see here the street with this alignment that we did not respect. So we kind of investigate this idea that start to happen. And there's an image after, please. Investigate this possibility of building above the street, the public space. It is something that happened at the end of the middle of the end of the 19th century. When next, in the Haussmannian moment, that's the Haussmannian style, and then debates started to express the idea of the picturesque. Maybe our streets, our boulevard, this first Haussmannian period is becoming too boring, and we should give some, diversity and eclectic and picturesqueness, in the city landscape. And this is when, in 1884, when they decided this decree of allowing people to build and to set back and to build over the public space. And that next tradition has given the possibility to offer different shapes to the building, as long as you limit the exterior at 50% of the whole facade here aligned on the street. So that's the plan. That's a concrete skeleton and a hemp insulation. Next. And this thick facade, this kind of double thickness, the thickness of the wall and the thickness of the facade is giving, this kind of also maybe picturesque relation between the different spaces. Next. Providing, new comforts, new uses, new, spaces that can provide, next. So another image where you can see the opening and the relation you have with the street. And with these 2 windows, you can see like all the way north, all the way south to Métro La Chapelle or Porte de la Chapelle on the right side. And then you can like sit and put objects and everything. Next. And that's the construction principle. So that's the concrete skeleton you can see here. That's the wooden secondary structure that we fill in with hemp, and on which we will apply a stucco, a gray, bluish, weird color that I will describe on top of it. Last layer as a, overall surface to maintain this idea of continuity of, banal building that exists all around in the neighborhood. Next. That's the concrete skeleton. We're very happy to refer ourselves to the domino skeleton as a you know, a very simple, very direct way of using concrete. So it's plinth, floors, and columns. Next. And then you have this mix of hemp, lime, and water projected from the outside inside, you know, the skeleton that you can here recognize with the kind of ghosts existing here that, on which you will apply this mixture. Next. That's the strategy of the envelope, so skeleton around which we put the envelope. Next. And that's the end. Here, next, sorry, just to see what's next. Okay, before. I'm very sorry. And if you zoom in, you can understand this, you know, different topics I was trying to express. And this is when, at this moment, where we started to just the same principle from practice to research. So we did this building with stone, then we started the desire of an exhibition, of a research about the stone, and it's the exact same thing here. We did this house, we did this building. There is also hemp in the stone building, and at this moment, at the finalization of this building, we realized that, you know, something was happening in these two projects, in this kind of Wallness, you know, situation of an insulation being a wall which is not a load-bearing wall anymore, like it used to be, one would say. But it was a wall, you know, with a new mission, with something that was dedicated to thermal comfort, to economy of energy, of consumption of energy, to maintain a certain comfort inside the building. And also, like I said, with the house in Normandy, this kind of relation we have these parts of the building. Here you can see the visible, you know, the things, the visible relations you have with exterior. So it's like we saw on the image from the apartment. You can large windows, large views on the outside, but still here something is happening. There are relations between the inside and the outside here at this very moment of the fullness of the building. Next. So we said, okay, let's try to understand what we do. We do a wall, but this wall is being a little more complex than a load-bearing wall. It has this mission I was mentioning. What we like here, we started to describe what we were doing through, you know, the history of the position, you know, of insulation inside the building. So either you have like a very, very, very small insulation here on top, kind of response to thermal bridges. Then you can have no insulation. Then you can have insulation on the outside with a cladding. Then you can have, this happens a lot in Belgium, to masonry and an insulation in the middle and a bit of air. Without air, maybe insulation in the inside. And here, that was the example we were dealing with, Rue Marx-Dormois. So the whole wall becomes insulation because the stucco, because the inside panels, and because of the insulation, everything becomes a component of the thermal, topic of the construction. Next. So this is why we decided, okay, there is something happening here. There is this new relation we should consider with the construction of the wall. So we began to respond to funding to start the research, which recently has been published in Edition Cariatide in 2024, the end of the last year. And it's the exact following of, the constructive principle that we talked about. Next. So that's the book. And the book, let me describe it for a little bit. Next. So it really wants to understand what this is, like constructively, theoretically, and thermally, and everything. On many, many layers, we wanted to understand, okay, what is this new relation we have with the wall? Next. So that's the cover. Next. And this is how it is organized. Next. So let me just describe the few things that we deal with. So at the beginning of the book, we put a glossary of physical, botanical, technical, imaginary related terms. Then there is this kind of theoretical article about the need for solid. That was the previous title of the book, and then it became Wallness. to kind of integrate this ambiguity between wallness, wholeness, wallness, wellness, and everything. So that's the need for solids. So the necessity of thermal investigation, thermal topic, thermal issues, is bringing back the necessity of full facades. Then building with hempcrete, it's nothing else but the description of the site we had to deal with Marx Dormois. Then we make this short history of installation. Then the topic of the resources, which is very important, is the very same one as the one we did with the stone, but with the hemp and lime. Blow-up image production and architectural research, because this book has been led with the help of Jaime Meloni, our friend and photographer. He has been doing all the images, by the way, that you see tonight, I mean pictures, and thanks to him. And measuring the hair, very important, the topic of the hair. I will also be talking about it. So the behavior of the material, the relation this material has with exterior, from which we start to talk about new types of transparencies. Then relation with fragments of scientific discourse, which is a relation we had with this engineers, Sandrine Marceau. She's a great engineer, and she has a microscope close to the school Paris-Est. And so she opened the door of her office, and then we started to have this very scientific look, very precise look at the matter. And then we illustrate it with this conversation. Then the value, very technical. And then there is this very last article that has been written by Anna Rosellini and Roberto Gargiani, two historian, architect professors that try to put, in contact different moments of architectural history dealing with this matter of thermal consideration. Next. So that's the pages of the book. Next. So on two columns, so that's the resource. So on the left part, you have the lime. Here you have the lamp. So we described the growth of the lamp and also the way the lime was, the sedimentary rocks were extracted to become lime. Next. To start with the resource, so we have this very great luck in France to be one of the greatest cultivator of hemp in Europe and even in the world, I believe. And it's a very, very easy resource, to grow. So that's the situation where you have all the, in gray, the position of the resource around Paris. Next. And it's kind of a bad, plant. It's something that grows everywhere. But at the very beginning, the stem of the hemp was dedicated to incineration. Was since like the beginning of the 70s, middle of the 70s. It was not. He did not find any uses, any purpose. Next. So we start to have this very close look to the as a documentation. You document the thing that you look at, you observe. And Jaime Meloni was doing this image, following up, the way Eugène Adjet, for instance, was looking at the plant, bad seeds, bad plants all over around Paris in the changes of the metropolis between the 19th and 20th century. So same, discourse, same principles, same systems of observation. Next. The growth, of course, when it grows, it gets carbon, like any vegetal. Next. That's the plant. Next. And then that's the root. Next. That's the stem here. So we zoom in more and more. Next. And then that's the description. And this is what we will use here in the middle, le chenevote. So la chenevote is exactly what you use when you talk about hemp. That's the part of the stem, which is l'écorce, so the crust, even if there is no crust, because that's the only thing, that's the only matter that you have in the stem. And the fibers here, the smaller dots here, are dedicated to textile, and recently, since 30 years, and then the leaves for other purposes. So that's the chenevote. That's the things that we will extract from, detached, extract from the fibers, and that will be used to produce this mix of hemp and lime. Next. So we go further into the stem. Next. So that's one moment. That's the fiber that's separated from the Schoenwort next. So we go into, and that's the fiber again. I missed one picture. Well, that's okay. Of the Schoenwort, but it's then packs of Schoenwort bring into the site. So from one plant, one resource, one product of the soil, a product of the soil, while the stone is a fragment of the soil. So the two different relations with the crust, with earth. And here you get the pack, and next. And then back to the ground with production of the lime. So you enter the quarry. Next. I will go fast. So that's the sedimentary rocks. Different way, because very soft, different ways of extraction than the stones we were talking about previously. Next. And then you enter this Saint-Astier, very famous lime industry with the ovens. Next. You heat everything. That's something you have to be very, very aware of, that you heat, so you consume energy in the production of the hemp. This is why some people say that it's not like the best insulation, but it has other very great qualities. Next. And the packs, just like the hemp, just like the Schoenwort, other packs, other bags, sorry, of lime bring into the site. Next. To produce, this image we were looking at, so the projection with a bit of water, so hydraulic lime mixed with Schoenwort gives this kind of continuity, this kind of very soft self-load-bearing walls, but not load-bearing walls. So it's kind of ambiguous, because it's not like a wall, it cannot get the loads, but still it insulates. So what if, that was the question, what if the purpose of the wall nowadays was rather to insulate than to get the loads? And then you start, sliding from the notion of wall to the notion of wallness. The idea of the wall becomes important, but the construction of the wall becomes a little more complex. Next. And then with Sandrine Marceau, I was mentioning her, then we start to dig and to look a little more precisely into the matter, just again, in a very rationalist and very scientific, method. Next. And we described all the components of the mixture. So this is the lime, so you can understand the different holes, different porosities, different shapes inside the lime. Next. That's the Schoenwort. Here also you can describe different ways. So this is where transparency, porosity, penetration of air and humidity become and start to bring this again idea of transparency a little different than just the view. Next. And we described, we drew, and we looked at everything, just like our heroes, such as Viollet-le-Duc, looking at things, redrawing, just like he was doing Le Mont Blanc. Very, very happy to follow this kind of new constructive rationalism, following this relation with matter, discovering the matter, describing the matter in order to build things and to understand the things that we built and the material that we manipulate. Next. And the greatness is the diversity of pores, of holes inside. So you have very small ones, you have very big ones. Next. You have different shapes. And this is where it gets very sophisticated. So you have shapes in order to allow humidity to penetrate the envelope and to stop at the middle, more or less, of the envelope. But it also gets the air. So it insulates, because insulation is more or less captation of the air, but also it gives some dynamic phenomenon through the circulation of the water, humidity, inside the envelope. Next. So you have connected porosities for water, humidity. You have also insulated porosities for air as an insulation purpose. But you have also some weird, in between, what we call blind, aveugle porosities. So you can circulate here, but then water stops here a little bit, and it gets transformed because of the heat. And here at this moment, at this level of sophistication of this pore, then water becomes to change of state. It was liquid, and it becomes vapor, and things like this are happening inside the envelope of hempcrete. Next. Then you start relooking at this building and this facade, and we understand that here, okay, you can see, that's marvelous, but here other things are happening. And this is the idea we're very interested in, is this new transparency, these new relations that this kind of transparent insulations provide. It's very, very rich, it's very something that it's sliding from one idea to the wall, which was something that blinds, that separates, that insulates at the very first, degree of the definition. But there, it connects the two climate, the one of the outside and the one of the inside. Next. And then, to finish, the topic of the air, which is maybe the one that's more important. Next. This is one of the most important diagrams for us that we did during the study. So we described that we have three types of air. You have the air of the outside, that's the air of the climate, that's the environment we breathe, that's the atmosphere, one would say. The C is the comfort of the space, of the room. It's something that we should, of course, it's maybe one of the most important purposes of architecture, giving comfort to inhabitants. And then you have this new type of air, which is the air of the envelope, the air of, being complex and rich because of the use of the hemp. Next. So we want to start to describe and to represent, such as René Descartes, when he was describing this beautiful book, Les Météores, trying, again, like a scientist, to represent the climate, the breath, the ventilation, the circulation of the air. Next. Also, Vincent van Gogh, when he was, at the hospital because of too crazy, he started also to look at, this kind of movement in the air, very interested in this kind of new aesthetic, in the invisible, the relation we have of, representation of phenomenological phenomena, things that you feel. It's not only the representation of the things that you see, but it's also the representation of temperature, of wind, of all such things that make, architecture important. Next. Also the representation of the room, which is an extraordinary project, transformation at Rothschild Foundation from Augustin Rey, when he started the hygienist, following up the hygienist movement, rationalist hygienist movement of the late 19th, starting to be in the 20th century one of the most important ways of describing and dealing with the city. Next. And then we go back to our assemblage, to conclude this presentation. It's, the section, the very blind section, in between the windows, Remarques Dormant. That's concrete. 6 is the air inside and outside. Then you have the hemp is number 3. You have the pieces of wood, number 2. Then you have the fermacell panels, along which we project the hemp. And then you have this plaster, this bluish, grayish plaster. The color was decided because we didn't want to be white, to be too modern. We don't want to be beige, to be too Parisian. So we choose something in between. Because it's always like this, the thing we don't want to be, rather than the things we want to be. Next, please. And then we start to describe, different things rather than just the visible. And, you have different things. You have the characteristics of the component of this assemblage, but you have also the phenomenon inherent inside the envelope. So here you talk about, for instance, density. In density, of course, concrete becomes black, air becomes white. And then you can have like soft relation, and everything becomes coherent with the use of these lines, horizontal lines. In Rue Oberkampf, we're using this Auguste Choisy-like drawing where you can see the load-bearing walls, describing the fragment and the construction of a building. Here we decided that we should be horizontal. And one line is having different types of thickness just to express the value of the things we're looking at. So here we look at density. Next. Here we look at porosity. So of course, air becomes very black, while concrete is becoming a little whiter. But still everything is being connected because we know that with the use of stucco, the use of hemp, the use of fermacell, everything, is able to be, transpercé. Sorry. Tired. Next. And then this was the specificities, and then you start talking about phenomenons. So this is humidity, for instance, in winter. So humidity, but what we like here is the fact that in the previous drawings, you can recognize, the different components because each of them has one very specific value. And then you can say, okay, each one has a mission, of course, in the composition of the facade, but they all get, readable on the drawing. Here, you cannot recognize the things because everything becomes blurry when you start talking about insulation and, So in the phenomenon of the humidity, we can understand that during winter, the beginning of the envelope, then the concrete resists a little bit, but all the rest, the wood, everything becomes, attached in a one same, let's say, value. Next. And that's, the blurriness of the summer, so same drawing but during summer, so it's getting drier outside, while inside keeps, one would say, a certain level of humidity and comfort, because when it's getting a little colder, when you do not use any air conditioning, then the water keeps, being, feelable, one would say, in the comfort, in the spaces. Next. And then you can start talking about temperature. That's another topic. So the temperature during winter, so it's very, let's say, cold outside. Well, it's still warm in the inside. And you start describing, and what we hope is through this way of representing the invisible, this notion of wall that we were talking about is becoming something slightly different and gives, new possible interaction, ways of designing the building, which is yet just a starting point. It's just, questions we want to raise rather than, just defined answers. But these drawings were done at the very, very end of the research. And we were very interested in kind of searching, okay, what if, these invisible things that we need to deal with, such as climate, such as comfort, such as temperature, such as everything, should be giving new, understanding of the assemblage of the building and then the construction next. That same drawing, temperature, but during summer, it's getting warm outside, but still cold inside because of the great insulation we provide. Next. And this is it. Thank you very much.
What a magnificent lecture. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties, but you were heroic. I know we have nearly every terrific housing architect in London is in the room. So we have about 10 minutes, and I'm going to ask one question before sort of opening it up to the floor. I wanted to ask about really whether you'd encountered resistance from the procurement culture in France or the regulatory culture in France towards the more experimental work you were doing in terms of the technology of the buildings.
Do I find resistance? Do we find resistance?
Yeah, what were the challenges you encountered?
Well, it really depends on the clients, yeah. I have to say. So the Remarques d'Ormois and Barbican, for instance, were done with social housing clients, such as RIVP, Paris Habitat, very famous, very great clients, I have to say. It's not a matter of budget, but it's the way they accept investigations. And Paris Habitat, for instance, have been investigating housing projects since the since the century. So they're very keen on understanding what's next, one would say. And resistance, yes, also with regulation, which is even more important. For instance, this building, Remarques d'Ormois here, would not be possible today because of new regulations, because of the use of the hemp, because of resistance of the hemp to humidity, even if, because this is what's great in this insulation is, for instance, this relation with water. It likes water. So, of course, it regulates it, but regulation now considers, because of insurances, that it's not like cutting enough, the inside and the outside. So protecting enough, the inside, the things that you do inside the building. And then we have the resistances of developers, which is another topic.
Yeah. Do we have any hands, kind of urgent questions from the floor? I should say, while you're thinking, TIPA's going to be back tomorrow night for those of you returning. You'll have noticed that we have a kind of, this is first part really of a double bill that we're showing an amazing documentary tomorrow night about the life of Fernand Pouillon, French architect, of course, celebrated for his use of load-bearing stone construction in the post-war era. And TIPA's going to, as I think Ken Frampton as well is going to be contributing to a conversation around after the film. I think there will be, it is sold out, I think there'll be some tickets released tomorrow because the guest list isn't full, so I really would recommend it. I think someone's got the microphone here.
Hi. Thank you very much for that lecture. Yeah, it was very, very interesting. I'm coming from a developer's perspective, but just wanted to ask a question about hemp and the agricultural side of it. Just wondering how water hungry it is as a plant, and whether or not that's a consideration of its sort of life cycle in terms of its use in
the construction of hemp, you said?
In the agricultural side of it. So sort of using it as a material, but just thinking about the water and agricultural elements of it before it then becomes
the needs of water to grow. Well, it's like I said, I don't know how you can translate that, but mauvaise graine. How do you translate that? It's a plant that grows everywhere.
A weed.
It's weed basically. But weed, I would say that weed needs a little more. It's different. It needs some help. Here with the hemp, it's great because it grows everywhere. So the need of water, it's a good question, but as far as I know, it doesn't need much more water than another, plant. It doesn't need to be watered like more often than any other kind of culture, I would say.
Any more hands? There's one at the very back. Oh, actually, I can see two towards the back.
It's nothing to do with housing or anything like that. I wanted to ask about the amazing drawings and their kind of role in what you do, because they're really so beautiful, and you're constantly referencing artists. And I wanted to know it relates to all kinds of things that I'm interested in, but I wanted to know about whether you're using them generatively, reflectively, analytically, when they occur in the process and how they sort of interact with it. I suspect at different times.
No, it's true. It's a very good question. I think both. I would say we use them before, after, for research, for building. It's also something. My partner, for instance, he draws a lot during the sites, and he's very good at hand drawings and to set the conversation with contractors, for instance, during the building of the buildings. And it's to us maybe the most important tool, of the architect is the drawing. It remains for us because it's conversations, it's theoretical, and just like with Apollinaire, it brings very, very simple ways of because when you draw, you reduce, so you need to be very precise, of course, and the less you draw, the more effective. Less you put lines, this is why there are very few lines on the very last drawings. So reduce the amount of lines. And when you start to reduce the amount of lines, you start to consider, okay, what if I was reducing also the amount of components in the envelope? And you know what I mean? So it becomes a virtual circle, and you investigate, and then you build, and then you investigate again. So no, it's both. It's performative. It's for research. And it's true that we love. We have heroes, like I said, that were doing incredible drawings, and I think we can make one short history of drawings of something, and then even kind of limit architectural history to some of the most powerful drawings that we can see, and we're very happy to try to belong to this kind of relation with architecture through the drawings. It's true.
I think we've got one here.
I wanted to ask, with the apartments,
What, sorry?
With the apartments in Paris, you've got the visually solid hemp wall, but sort of vapor permeable and that. And then you had the windows, which are transparent visually, but they have a high thermal conductivity.
Exactly.
Complete opposite. How with those sort of things, how do you deal with the interfaces? I'm interested. Is there a method you use without using membranes and sealants and all of that, or do you have to use those sort of things?
No, you have to use insulation between the, compression of a small layer of insulation between the window and the wood in order for the water, the liquid water, not to enter the inside of the room. But the position, if it's the question of the window, was possible outside the envelope because the whole wall is insulation. So you don't have any thermal bridges. You can choose the position, if it's the question, if I understood correctly. The position of the window, it can be anywhere. It can be inside the envelope, it can be outside, referring to, the very first drawings we were talking about because of the position of when everything insulates, then the position of the window becomes a decision of the architect, not a decision of the insulation. So that's one part. But it's true that we did this building before the research. And I have to say that we would maybe, because as insulation, the hemp is way better than the window, because the window, it's visual, but there is no interaction of the air from the inside and the outside. So we even believe that even if you start to reduce the amount of light, you reconsider the quality of the space, which is not only dealing with the amount of light, but also with the quality of the air. And after this research, I think we would reduce, the quantity of glaze in the facade, in order to find a better balance between the quality of the exchanges and, of course, the visibility of the outside from the inside.
One last question. Then Max. Sorry.
Thanks very much. No, it's sort of a half-formed question, but I'm curious about this whole trajectory, which goes from something with a lot of definition, and sort of paradoxically, you end up where the wall sort of can be everything, but not in the same way that the stone.
Yeah, exactly.
Both the column and so on. So I just wonder, where is this all going? Do you go back to building with stone? What causes you to choose to build in the other way?
Well, I think everything's possible. I think we can keep building with stone, keep building with concrete, with wood, with everything. There is no one single solutions. But it's true that we're very interested in considering the walls. Let's try to merge, the things. It's true that they got separated at the end. In the lecture I did, for instance, you have the wall insulation, then you have the load-bearing walls. But in Rue Oberkampf, if I was a little more precise, there is hemp inside the building. And the stone itself, it has, because of its softness, in this case, of its very stony, it was also chosen because of its sedimentation system. And it offers, something to the envelope, which is load-bearing, on one hand, but also, reaction to air. And so, let's say that stone's best friend would be hemp. So that would be the perfect, at the end, envelope. Hemp, stone. Of course, you can use way more stones, but it does not. But then you consume a lot of matter. And then you can rather, kind of find a good balance between the two walls. But it's very interesting, I think. There's several systems. You have the concrete and the insulation. You have the wood and insulation. I think everything is like a try, And at the end, no, I don't know where it goes, but hopefully for the better. Yeah.
As I say, I think this is a conversation that hopefully there'll be part 2 of tomorrow night. And for those of you who aren't coming, we will record it, and you'll be able to catch up with it kind of online subsequently. But I do try and come. Thibault, it's been a sensational evening. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the invitation. Thank you.